but we will scan your barcode from a watch or a phone or even a tattoo. We go to the cafe afterwards. Please come along. It's a lovely day. You can sit outside and have a cake. All right, are we ready to go? All stragglers in. Enjoy your run. Have a good time. Are you ready? Go!
This is Camperdown parkrun in Dundee. It takes place every Saturday morning at 9:30, like every other parkrun in Scotland. It's a mostly trail route. There are some paved sections, but most of it's on trail or gravel, so trail shoes are recommended for this one, I'd say. It's a downhill start, as you can see here, but the camera kind of flattens it out, so whenever I'm going downhill, it's a bit steeper in real life than it looks on camera. Whenever I'm going uphill, it's a bit steeper in real life than it looks on camera. It starts quite simply. You just follow the path downhill and turn right along to the first marshal.
Thank you.
So I've described the route as a sort of wonky, squished figure of 8 type shape, and the first marshal that you get to is kind of in the centre, the crossover point. So we'll go past the first marshal and then just straight along a road that goes past the play park. It can get quite puddly if it's been raining, so it can be pretty wet at times. The day this was recorded was almost a year ago now, and it had been really dry leading up to it, I think, and the day was dry itself, as you can see, so that's pretty much perfect conditions. There are other spots that I'll point out that can get pretty muddy when it's wet, but when it's dry, they're really nice. So you just keep going straight along this road, and you'll get to a road that you have to cross, but that's where the second marshal is. So they'll keep everyone safe, make sure nobody gets squished.
Thank you.
And then you cross over and go down past the wildlife centre. There are 2 sets of bollards there, so just worth being careful there. We don't want anybody running into a bollard. So after you pass the second set of bollards, just about here is where you hit the 1 kilometre mark, at least according to my watch. The course, because of the trees and hills on the course, it does mess with the GPS and watches a little bit. I have been told that it's been measured properly multiple times, and it does come out to 5k. It's just a little bit inaccurate on GPS systems. For me, it usually comes up to about 4.93 to 4.95, so we're talking 1 to 2% out, which isn't really too bad in the grand scheme of things. And when we get to the bottom of this path, we'll turn right into the woods, and it's fairly flat again. So before too long, we are going to have to come back up. So for a while, you just follow this single path in the woods. It's just one path, so it doesn't branch off anywhere, so you're not going to get lost going up it. As you go along, you will eventually come to a wooden bridge. For me, in my head, that sort of marks the start of the hill. The hill doesn't really start until a little bit past that, but when I hit the bridge, I'm thinking, right, hill time now. There are 4 wooden bridges going up the hill. They're fairly close together. And the second kilometre pops in just about here, between the second and third bridge. And again, you just follow up the hill. No part of the hill is hugely steep. There's no crazy steep bits, especially compared to some other courses. But it's mainly the length of the hill that I think is the real difficult part. It does flatten off a little bit just for a few seconds before you get to the final push of the hill, and then it turns right and goes up to the top. Just as you get to the top of this section here, there's a tree coming up on the right. I usually check my watch as I'm coming up to that tree. because that's almost exactly halfway around the course, at least in terms of time. Not sure exactly on distance, but in time, for me, that's usually pretty close to halfway. So I can see it fairly early on in the run if I'm doing well, and if I am, I get a bit of a boost knowing, right, this is good, I can keep going. And if I'm a little bit behind where I want to be, there's still half the run left. There's plenty of time to kind of push myself and catch up with where I want to be. So after this, you'll come on a little downhill and then we're onto the road. Occasionally there are cars on here, but usually it's just one, if any. I mean, who'd be crazy enough to be up and out at 9:30 on a Saturday morning? So along this road there is a bit more uphill, but it's not, again, not hugely steep. It's just difficult because of everything that's come before it. So we'll carry on along this road and we'll go past the third marshal on the way. And then at the right turn just coming up, that's where the third kilometre beeps for me. And then we turn right and it's a nice downhill past Camperdown House, and instead of following the road that continues to the left, you just go straight ahead and it's back onto some trail paths. This bit here can get quite steep, and if it's wet it can be a little bit treacherous, so just be careful coming down here. But still, a downhill's very welcome after all the uphill we've just had. This path leads us straight back down to where the second marshal was, so at the road. So we'll cross that road again, and then we'll be on to a narrower path coming parallel to the wide road that we came out on the way past.
Thank you. Nice one, well done.
I thought this was quite interesting to see. This young guy who's running near me, he was about the same speed as me, but I think he was doing better on the downhills and I was doing better on the uphills, and on the flats we were about the same. So we overtook each other several times throughout the run. It was quite entertaining to watch, I thought. So as we carry along on this narrow path, you can see the finish line up towards the left, but we don't go straight there. We're only coming up to around 3.5 to 4k in. So instead of going straight up to where the finish line is, we get to the marshal, which is the same marshal we saw near the start, and we turn right and we go along a gravel path, which is usually called the meadow. You'll reach the 4k mark as you're coming down the meadow. It's somewhere around here.
Excellent.
It doesn't seem like it when you're running down it, but it is actually a decent downhill. If you ever run back it uphill, you realise, oh, that's, you know, a decent gradient. So try and make the most of it as you go down there. When you reach the bottom, you'll get into the woods and there's a couple of left turns, which will have you heading up towards where the finish is. Well, this section can get very muddy if it's been wet. Last week in particular there, it was just squelchy and slippy and great fun, but yeah, very wet. And the first time you're doing this run, this section does feel very, very long, because you've seen the finish not too long before, and it feels like you should be coming up on it any second, but it does go on probably longer than you'd expect. So I do have a few markers in my head that I try and keep in mind just to keep me focused on the next thing. So there's a bin that shows up on the left that I always wait for, and then at the wall on the right hand side there's a sort of archway where there would have been a door. Not long past that is a gate.
Yes, come on.
and then so you can overtake me there. At the very last, well, at the end of this the trail section, there's a little tree stump. You can't see it very well in the video, but we tend to call it the wooden molar. It looks like a little tooth coming out of the ground. So you turn left there, and then straight along to the path you started on. Right turn, and then it's just an uphill sprint, pretty tough uphill sprint to the finish, but it's not too long. So yeah, that's Camperdown Parkrun. It's a challenging route, but it really is quite enjoyable, and it's a great atmosphere, loads of great people there. If the weather's good and dry like it was in this video, then it's a really nice route to run on, even through the forest and the trails. It's really nice underfoot. If it's wet, it's still a really nice route to run on. It gets splashy and muddy. It's not going to be too fast, but it's great fun. So if you haven't been to Camperdown, I highly recommend that you give it a go. It's a really nice route despite all the hills, and I'm sure you'll have a great time there.